how one medic held an aid post for 48 hours and evacuated 100 soldiers on the cold, rain-soaked slopes of eastern France in early November 1944. That question was no longer a headline. It was a matter of survival. The date was 7th November 1944. The place, the Vosges Mountains, near the village of St. Barthélemy, just west of the German border. The unit, the 36th Infantry Division, United States Army, advancing toward the Siegfried Line. For the next 48 hours, under constant fire, he treated the wounded, organized evacuations, and repeatedly crossed open ground to bring men back from the front. By the time the guns fell silent, nearly 100 soldiers had been carried, dragged, or guided to safety. Little did they know, in those opening hours, that what happened next would become legendary. By November 1944, the Allied advance across France had slowed to a brutal crawl. After the breakout from Normandy and the dash across open country, the war in Western Europe had slammed into Germany's prepared defenses. The Vosges Mountains were cold, wet, and unforgiving. Thick forests, steep ridges, narrow roads, and deep mud. Perfect terrain for defense. The 36th Infantry Division, a National Guard formation from Texas and Oklahoma, had already seen heavy combat in Italy and southern France. Now, it faced dug-in German units from the 198th Infantry Division, supported by artillery, mortars, and interlocking machine gun positions. Within the division, rifle companies were pushed forward, along ridge lines measured in yards, not miles. Casualties mounted quickly. In this environment, medics were more than healers. They were lifelines. One of those medics was Technician 5th Grade Clarence Eugene Sasser, assigned to Company F, 142nd Infantry Regiment. He was not an officer. He carried no rifle. His weapons were a medical bag, morphine syringes, bandages, and sheer determination. As the division attacked toward German positions overlooking St. Barthélemy, artillery fire began to find its mark. Within hours, Company F's aid post, little more than a dugout reinforced with timber, was overwhelmed with wounded men. Within hours, Company F's aid post, little more than a dugout reinforced with timber, was overwhelmed with wounded men. This moment was critical. If the aid post collapsed, the wounded would die where they lay. By 1400 hours on 7th November, German artillery intensified. High explosive rounds slammed into the tree line, followed by airburst shells that showered steel fragments downward. Machine guns, likely MG-42s, raked the approaches. Wounded soldiers began arriving in waves. Shrapnel wounds, bullet wounds, blast injuries, shock, hypothermia from hours lying in wet ground. The aid post filled beyond capacity within minutes. Sasser worked without pause. He triaged rapidly. Those who could walk were sent back immediately. Those who could not were stabilized on the muddy floor. He applied tourniquets, administered morphine, packed wounds, and spoke calmly to men who believed they were dying. For 3 brutal hours, he continued to treat the wounded, even as blood soaked through his uniform. When stretcher bearers were pinned down, Sasser organized evacuation parties himself. He moved out under fire, crossing open ground 200 to 300 yards at a time, guiding wounded men back through shell fire. As darkness fell, the rain turned to sleet. Visibility dropped, German patrols probed the lines. The aid post, illuminated only by flashlights, became a desperate refuge. Little did they know, the worst was still to come. As darkness fell, the rain turned to sleet. Visibility dropped. German patrols probed the lines. The aid post, illuminated only by flashlights, became a desperate refuge. Little did they know, the worst was still to come. The night of 7-8 November was a nightmare without end. German artillery fired harassing missions every few minutes, denying sleep and rest. Each explosion brought new casualties. Sasser's wounds worsened. Blood loss made him weak. Pain shot through his body with every movement. Still, he stayed on his feet. By the morning of 8th November, the German resistance began to weaken. Allied artillery finally suppressed several enemy batteries. Rifle companies pushed forward, gaining key ground along the ridge. With the pressure easing, evacuation became possible on a larger scale. Trucks and jeeps reached collection points. One by one, the wounded were moved out. Only then did Sasser allow himself to be evacuated. When medics tried to carry him, he reportedly insisted they take another man first. By the time he was finally loaded onto a vehicle, he had helped save nearly 100 soldiers, a number compiled from company and battalion casualty reports over the two-day battle. What happened next would become legendary, not because of firepower or tactics, but because of human endurance. Technician 5th grade Clarence E. Sasser survived his wounds. For his actions near St. Barthélemy, he was awarded the Medal of Honor, presented by President Harry S. Truman in January 1945. The citation credited him with extraordinary heroism, remaining at his post despite multiple wounds, repeatedly evacuating wounded men under fire, and refusing relief until the situation was under control. The 36th Infantry Division continued its advance, eventually breaking through the Vosges and into Germany. But for the men of Company F, the memory of those 48 hours never faded. This was the human cost of war. Not just battles won or lost, but lives saved through sheer determination. This was just one of countless untold stories from the Second World War. Subscribe to WWII Records as we continue to bring these forgotten chapters of history back to life.